so it's the situation in Israel, which is on my mind, obviously, and the situation in Israel is my main expertise. My studies of let's call the field of scientometrics and measuring science is somewhat of an aside that I'll get to tell you how I came into that field as we go. But I want to acknowledge indeed the change of title. When I corresponded with Hugo, sometimes like 6 or 7 months ago, I had an idea to push a concept which we will talk about, called the Annus Horibilis, the horrible ear in scientific careers. But as me and my team are working on that, we came to understand that there's a more interesting story to tell than just counting how many years do we lose along our career in not publishing papers. So the new title, From Publish or Perish, from the pressure to publish to fund and flourish. I'm going to tell you a surprising story, maybe not so surprising, maybe very intuitive even, that if you have money, you publish. If you do not have research funds, you're basically doomed. And this is the story I'm about to tell you. Okay? Okay. So, what I want you to do right now is imagine yourself. I have now assigned you to be the dean, the provost, or the president of your university, or even the minister of higher education. And so you are responsible for a team of scholars, professors who are employed by your institution. And your main task, this is what we are assigned to as administrators, to improve the productivity of our team, right? We want our team, our department, our research institute to be more productive, to publish more papers, to contribute to society back more knowledge. So it's your responsibility, okay? There's someone paying us to do our work, and the assumption is that every year we are paid a sum of money as a salary, and we return on the investment, which is a concept in economics, that you get a salary and you produce publications. That's the process in and out. Now, the question that we asked, based on a prior paper, which was called the Annus Mirabilis, the Year of Wonders, this special year during a scientist's career where he published a lot of papers on that specific year. So we did a study of Israel laureates and the most cited physicists and a wonderful Department of Economics in the US. But so our emphasis was on those exceptional years of productivity. But to the left of the distribution, we saw some troubling numbers, which became the focus of the present paper, which is the Annus Horibilis, the horrible years of non-productivity. And the big question is, how can we, it's a scientific question, and then it becomes an administrative question. How can we, as deans, chairs, provosts, presidents, improve productivity and minimize the rate of Annus Horibilis in our university? Now, my university, Hebrew University, holds something like 1,000 professors, and we pay 1,000 salaries every year. Salary would be an average $100,000 per professor. So the annual budget of, just paying money for our professors would be $100 million a year. But the question is, do they give us back? And how many years are actually lost? I gave them $100,000. Did they give me 0 publications that year? In Israel, as in some other countries, the more a unit publishes, or the university publishes, the more money it gets from the government. So we are concerned about the loss of investment, okay? And now I want you to guess in the chat. Please write a number, okay? You are the president, you are the provost. What is your guess for the percentage of your faculty, of your professor who would, every year would provide zero publications? What is the share of the Annus Horibilis per year in your, university? Okay. So please write in the chat, and later we'll see how good you are at predicting the loss. I call it the loss of talent or the loss of human potential. And, as administrators, we seek to minimize the loss, okay? In the title, I wrote from publish or perish to fund and flourish. So the way we talk about academia is usually through the publish or perish. There's a program called Publish or Perish, taking the slogan and creating a very nice software. But we speak about that throughout academia. I cover the literature. Every discipline has, issues with the pressure of publish and perish. We have that in philosophy, we have that in medicine, we have that in economics. People who run institutions, complain about the pressure of publish or perish. There are critiques that it produces garbage science, too many papers which are worth nothing. So there are many criticisms over the publish or perish. But the assumption, so here's just a new paper coming out this year in Sociological Forum, speaking about American academia, calling it the fear factory. Okay? How American academia is creating fear amongst its faculty. Professors feel that if they don't publish, then their salary will go down, or they will not be promoted next year as they wished for. So academia builds a fear factory. So the assumption is that people will be very productive if they feel unproductivity, okay? So here's a quote from that study. Advisors tell doctoral students to publish idly in the top journals, as otherwise it does not count. And this is the common complaint. So I was department chair, and my young professors were always complaining that I'm pushing them too much and that I'm counting how many papers they produce every year. And they said, it's quantity over quality, and it's not good for science. Okay, so that led me and my team. I should acknowledge I'm working with two colleagues, Neil Rotem, who is finished his PhD last year in the US, and Dr. Keith Goldstein, who's now based in Japan. So we are a team of 3 working on that paper. So we have an assumption coming from the publish or perish that because of the pressure pulled by this normative framework of higher education, that most professors will be productive year in, year out. They will publish. Otherwise, no promotions. You know, when you read a CV and you see a gap year, like professors didn't publish 1 or 2 years, you ask questions. What does it tell about the future? Is it going to be a problematic career? And so people fear to have this Annus Horibilis on their CV, so we assume productivity. And when we speak about, usually, especially in sociology, about variations, we assume that you would find most variation between institutions. Like Harvard attracts the best or the most prolific professors, and some low-ranking universities gets the rest. And the difference would not be between professors, but rather between institutions. So it's the hierarchy of institutions that matters. And the third assumption is, and my colleague, Dr. Kit Goldstein, says, these are the slackers. It's a question of motivation. They're simply lazy. They don't work. And another would argue, no, it's, you know, we have a problem of what we call deadwood. Some people get, you know, nominated to a professorship, but then that's it. They stop working and they have tenure, and that's it. They are deadwood. But the assumption is that it's not a big problem. There are not many people like that. Now, I raise questions about the 3 assumptions. Are we correct in assuming that most professors publish year in and year out? Is it the case that variability is between institutions, and is the problem a personal problem of person management? Okay? And I will try to convince you today that this is not the right way to think about the problem. Okay? So this brings me to our study. 5 years ago, I was on another sabbatical. I'm here at UST Hong Kong on a sabbatical for 1 semester. So 5 years ago, I was at MIT in the US, and I was lucky somehow to read a paper where a company named Academic Analytics announced, and here's your opportunity, announced that it is willing to provide data for free as long as the university takes responsibility for, you know, privacy issues and data management and blah, blah. And they handed us the data. You can see so what's amazing in this data and what the company is doing, that they collect information about the entire higher education scene in the US, okay, for the what we call R1 universities, research universities. No, so no community colleges in there, no liberal arts small colleges in there. I'll show you the numbers immediately, but it's a huge effort of data collection from public sources. So they scan through, you know, different digital techniques, all the papers, all the federal funding that people get, all their citations, all their awards, all the information is collected, and then they do some manual corrections, and they get some of the information from the university, which basically is a client of the company. Okay, so here's the company, Academic Analytics. I will just show you the very first, you know, beginning. So here in this small short, I can send the presentation later. In this short 4-minute, they describe how they collect the information. what the university as a client gets through. And there's a story to that, that I was chair in 2008, chair of my department, and we in Israel have a quality assurance process every 5-7 years that we need to write a self-evaluation report to the government. And I was just entering my chairship, and so I asked, where is the button that you push and you get all the information? And people told me, you know, the administration told me, there is no button. You need to go collect all the CVs and start manual counting. How many prizes, how many publications, where people are traveling on their sabbatical, what the quality of their institution in their PhD or a postdoc. Everything was on paper, which was just, you know, just getting people to give you their CV. That's, anyway, I was complaining a lot that there is no automatic collection of data. And a friend of, you know, not friend, family member who was in high tech heard me complaining, and he told me, let me solve your problem. And he sent a team of programmers to interview me, and then I, you know, explained what we need. And they went out to the field to see if there are other companies doing what I want. And I think they found academic analytics. At the time, in 2008, they were focused on medical institutions only. And they found this company, and they came back and said, yes, there is a software. That means there's a market. Let's develop a software. And we together created through Hebrew University a company called Coolsite. It was supposed to run the entire higher education system of Israel. It was the company, the idea for the company was taken by the government as a good idea, but then the top administrators of the university in Israel feared that someone is going to count productivity, and they made hell, and the company subsequently ended its life in 2020. So in 2018, still my program was active, and I touched base with academic analytics. I told them, you succeeded where I failed. So the idea for having that collection of data came from an administrative point of view, an administrative interest to improve productivity. And many institutions feel that someone is going to count their productivity, and academic analytics is doing just that. Okay, so no. Okay. So what I have, and you need to read it from left to right, although the timing is, we have data from 2006 until 2020. For 395 universities, that's a big number of universities, 305,000 faculty members, professors, okay, employed in those 395 universities, and the total number, and you need to start thinking, that's a complex issue. You need to start thinking as an administrator, how many career years you have. So let's say I got my position at the age of 35. Retirement age is, let's assume, 65. Then I have, to me, 30 career years. Okay? So as an administrator with 1,000 professors, you have lots of career years under your management. Okay, so the total number of career years in my sample is 4 million. Okay, and the number of publications we have for the faculty is more than 10 million publications. Okay, that's the sample. Okay, now the big question I ask, how many of those 4 million career years have 0 publications? That is the question. Okay, how much of that is Annus Horibilis of those 4 million? Okay, that's the big question. And the following question would be, what can I do to minimize this number of lost productivity or lost talent or lost potential? Okay. So here's what we do. Our dependent variable is a very simple one, binary measure. So for each year in your career, in your American professor career, you either published, and you could publish 1 paper, 2 papers, 3 papers, 12 papers, 70 papers if you're a physicist, or 0. And we count the zeros. Okay? We're interested in the number of zeros. Okay. So basically, you understand that we are going into a logistic regression, and we haven't got the multi-level logistic regression yet. So I will only show you at the end. But this is where we're going. Okay, we are trying to understand the probability of a 0 annual return on investment. And what we have as independent variables is institute ranking from, not coming from our data, but from, how it's called, I forgot the name right now, but it's, external institute ranking, which usually is ranking based on research performance. We have the funding, meaning federal funding per person per year. So we know if you was awarded a research grant, and we know how much money you were granted, okay, each year. We know your veteran, so meaning our number of years in the institution, so how many years are you employed, years since the PhD, and we also have rank and gender. I will not be able to show you the effects of all variables today, but my interest today will be with funding. Okay. In the remaining of the presentation, I will proceed in 3 stages. First, and the most interesting thing is just the prevalence of the Annus Horibilis. How many years are lost? That's, if you have that number, you can go home and tell stories of how many lazy people are in academia. Then the question is whether it's an institutional variation, so Harvard versus others. So Harvard is a metaphor, but the top 5, top 20, top 50 versus the other 350 universities. So is it the difference between universities, or is it the difference between professors? So Harvard too will have its lazy people who some of their career years bring nothing home, nothing to their dean or nothing to their president. And then I'll show you initial results for how money makes a difference in the prevalence of the Annus Horibilis. And this is where our new title comes from, that we found that money makes the world go round. Money makes a difference in academia. Okay. We need to take a look at the chat. Okay, whoa, 30, 35, 50, 30, 30, 25, 55. I have a friend who's a big numbers person, and he would say, let's average the number and we'll get the correct. And probably if we did that exercise, that would be indeed the correct thing. So just as a beginning, average, if you take the 10 million publications for the 4 million professors, you get a simple number, 2.56 publications per year of American professors from 2006 till 2020. That's the big average, okay? Now, when did I start my career? 1995. I was invited to a meeting with our provost, all young faculty who were just recruited, and he told us, I want 2 papers per year. And I want you to travel to 2 conferences per year, because if you travel to 2 conferences, you'll have to write 2 papers, and that's what I want. And what we see in this figure that, 20 or 30 years ago, I'm growing up, that one, that's the number, just somewhat above 256. And we have the numbers, but I don't show you that from 2006 till 2020, the number is going up. Not much. In 15 years, something like of a third of a paper going up, but the trend is going up, supporting the claim that publish or perish, that people become more productive. Yet, okay, this is what the average makes us lose attention of, and what Hugo mentioned before, that most of the people in this field of scientometrics are interested in the very productive professor, like the Nobel laureates. But from an administrative point of view, your focus should not be make the genius more genius, but rather make the non-productive people more productive. So here's the big number, okay? And you guessed it quite well, actually, that 40% of the 4 million career years that we paid for, American government paid for, private funding paid for, we got nothing in return in 40% of the years. Now, that's a gross number. If we run a very conservative model, we get an estimate of 32%. So for every dollar you put in, you get back 66%. That's, as a metaphor, okay? You lose more than 30% of your investment each year. Nothing returns. And when I say nothing returns, is that if the government funds the university by publications, then a third lost is a third lost from the money we could get from the government. That's a big number. Okay? And here you have the table. On the left side is annual number of publications. So here's the surprising 0 being the biggest number. Again, Hugo mentioned earlier the Lotka curve. This is a great example for the Lotka curve, where it's very rare. So 4% of the American professors would have 11 plus publications per year. Some indeed get up to 70 publications per year, the most productive ones, mostly in physics. But then you see the biggest number is a non-productive figure. The Annus Horibilis controls 40% of that table. And then you add 1 paper per year, and you get almost 50% of all annual years that you pay for. You get either nothing or just 1 publication. And we are accustomed to assume 2 papers per year, okay? That's only 12% of the cases, and it's dropping down. Was the not annotate? I have this Okay, I forgot how to use Zoom. Anyway, you get the picture. Okay, the Annus Horibilis dominates the productivity of a group of professors as a team, and we need to think how we minimize that number as administrators, and then as scientists too. We need to try to explain the source of variation in that horrible year of non-productivity. Okay. So we looked at the chat, and indeed many of you predicted somewhere between 25 and 50%, and I think 30 was the model result. So yeah, you got it quite good. Okay. Now, for the second question, is it Harvard versus the rest? Is it the top 50? Or the top 20 or the top 5, meaning that most of the variation would be that in some universities you have all the productive professors, and in the other universities you gathered all the non-productive professors. And what we show you here, that this is a wrong way to proceed. Okay. We employ the variance component model, so it's a basic kind of HLM or multi-level model where you simply divide the variation into between institution and between individual variation. And from year to year, there's some variability. So sometimes we only look at 2020 as a sample year. Sometimes we model the entire 2006, the entire 15 years, from 2006 till 2020. And what you see is that between university variation accounts to 5 to 10% of the variation, whereas most of the variation, 90 to 95%, is between professors. That means, and again, I use Harvard as a metaphor, that even at Harvard, you will have a bunch of professors who bring nothing occasionally. Okay, the Harvard would tend to be a bit better than other institutions, but still, many of its professors would have, if you open their CV, you would be surprised to see that on some years they didn't publish anything. Now, parentheses, each of us needs to think on ourselves, count your career, open your CV and count how many years during my career, so this is mostly for the veterans amongst us, during my career, how many years did I produce nothing? Okay. So I think in the 30 years that I work, I had 2 or 3 Annus Horibilis. When we initially did the study of the Annus Mirabilis, and we picked a very top economics department in American academia, we surprisingly found that in that top institution, not all faculty publish from year to year, and the number was close to the 30%, what I call lost talent, okay? Even in that institution, top institution. So we are talking about a person level phenomena mostly. And my colleague, Keith Goldstein, said, so these are the slackers. These are the lazy professors. They got, tenure and that's it. They retire at 40. Stop working. They are simply lazy. And I argue with him. I think this is not, we need a good rationale, theoretical rationale for why people end up each year with a publication, and what is the process, the mechanism, the sociological mechanism that produces papers that on some years during a career, the process is not working, the mechanism is absent. Okay? And what I'm trying to convince you today that that process would be funding. Okay? Okay. And my message for you today is the following. If you have research grants, you publish. If you have more money, you publish more. Okay? I'll repeat. If you have research grants, that means you will not have, or the chances for an Annus Horibilis, if you have money, go down significantly. The more money you have, the more papers you will publish, not just one in comparison to zero, but more, you have big money, you have many papers. Okay, so here's the explanation for that summary statement. 79% of those professors who ever won, meaning between 2006 and 2020, ever won a federal grant had published in 2020. Okay? If you ever won a grant, 80% for you to publish something in 2020. On the other hand, those 43% who never won grants, okay, during their career, no, of those who never won grants in their career, 43% did not publish in 2020. So if you have a grant, the likelihood that you will have an Annus Mirabilis is more than twice lower than if you don't have research funding. Okay. This is a big statement. Okay. You are twice as likely to publish if you have a research, you won research grants compared to people who did not win a research grant. And the second empirical finding is that professor who had an Annus Horibilis in 2020, meaning did not win, okay, did not publish in 2020, but did win a research grant in the years before. Okay? So they won research grants. Those who had an Annus Horibilis won almost $2 million across their career, compared to more than $4 million of those professors who did publish that year. That means that the more money you get from the federal government in the US, the higher the number of publications you are able to produce year in and year out. Okay? Now, this is where we think that this is a kind of a revolutionary finding, because let me see, I think this is this is where I'm opening up for discussion, but let me take you through my thinking, okay? Usually in American academia, in Israeli academia, grants are competitive. So we are very proud if only 25% of those who applied for money got funding from the government. We say we have a very competitive program. That means that of every competitive program, we produce a likelihood, a high likelihood, that people will not be able to publish in the following years. So the competitive nature of academia is self-destructive, or it's, I don't know, when you play football and you put the ball in your own, I don't know.
Own goal?
Your own goal, yeah. We kick our own goal. So I think it tells us that the way we operate academia is problematic because we structure processes that create a big number of Annus Horibilis. Okay? And we need to rethink the way we provide funding for research in a way that everybody gets something as a bottom line, not zero. Everybody gets something, and then you put on that a competitive element so everybody can work from year to year. Otherwise, what do you do with no money? You cannot employ a PhD student. You cannot host a postdoc. You cannot operate your laboratory. You're doomed. No money. You can't work. And I was interviewing a guy in psychology, and he told me, to publish a paper in Science or Nature, which we do in psychology, in neuropsychology, we need $1 million. That's the price tag for a paper. We need, either you're a genius that you can do an amazing study without money, but most are not geniuses. We need large data, huge experiments. That's $1 million. But the competitive nature of academia is such that very few people get $1 million, and you create a structure that very few people can publish in top journals. And I think the results coming from this study would be that we suggest this, as I suggested, a basic, like those in Europe now talk of a basic salary for everybody, and then you can have competitive elements above that. I think that's the way. If I was an administrator running and I would have my budget and I would see those results, I would think, okay, I need to change the way I allocate my resources in a way to minimize the rate of Annus Horibilis and maximize the number of papers. That's my take.
All right, thank you so much, Gad. It was a really nice presentation. Definitely provocative and counter the current kind of incentives that we have in science and in academia. Let me open the floor because I think there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions. Let me start with my colleague Yair Posiglione. I think he has several questions on his mind or comments. So, Jerry, please
okay.
Ask away.
Thanks, Professor Yair. I really like this because I'm a proponent of guaranteed income as it is, and I think this extends the idea to our workplace in the university. And it would be really interesting, of course, if we could start running some experimental or trials as has happened, I think, with guaranteed income as well. I'm not quite sure how that would happen, but thank you for the presentation very much. I had some questions which I put in the chat, and I'm trying to remember which ones they are. So I'll find them and I'll start to read them. Okay, one question, of course, was I'm just curious if publications of university presidents while they're in office or out of office are counted, because we've had university presidents here who have been quite productive even as they're in the office of the presidency. And of course, if they're the ones that we're trying to appeal to about the way that research funds are allocated, it might have some relevance. But that's a question which only affects a small portion, I think. But you might want to have a comment on that. The other thing is, you said American government paid for, and of course, this is about tax money that goes to the university. So my question was, and maybe because I got on late for technical reasons, I was wondering whether your sample of research universities also included private universities or the Ivy League and so on, because of course they don't get any tax money except through some of the some of the government research funding. So that was, that was one question. And if in fact you have both public and private universities, it'd be interesting to aggregate or disaggregate the data. The other question was, in our university over the years, we've evolved here, and I'm sure in other places. Of course, we often copy other universities around the world. The number of professors of practice has increased. And these are people that are not really expected, they're professorial, not really expected to produce publications, but expected to have an impact in the society, their stature, and maybe they're for other reasons. So that was the question. My final question was answered by Hugo. I had a silly question because I got on late. Were professors from sort of community colleges, were they included in the sample? And the answer is no, he said to me. So anyway, thank you very much for this presentation, which has a lot of implications, which I think it'd be good to have a more global discussion on this question. So thank you very much.
Sure. So let me respond quickly. I think all are counted. So all who are present on the ledger of the university are counted. So president included. Now, Harvard has 4,000 professors, so one president will be, insignificant. When I speak about funding, it's federal programs, so like the NIH. So it's not tax money that is coming into the university, it's winning federal competitive research grants when we have usually they run for 3 years, 4 years. So we have exact timing for each paper, for each grant, and we can see, in future work, for how long, if you won a grant, for how long it keeps you alive, even if your money's. So, and then I don't think we have a professor of practice tag on people. We have the rank. Like, assistant, associate, full professor, and we have the timing of promotions. One thing that I told my team, so what we can do in future work is also try to predict mobility, because we have people moving from university to university. And so is it really the case that the top universities hunt the people who get the funding and then pull them up? So with this kind of data, we'll be able to provide an answer that. And I repeat, the company is willing to provide the data for for the public good, so you can sign a contract and get the data. It's nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, if I may add one thing. Actually, the mobility tag, I was thinking about it, but from a bit of a different angle. I was thinking that when a person moves in the first year in the new institution, maybe the person is not able, or if not the first, at least the second, maybe, is not able to publish because of, this person is settling in, maybe to a new city, a new university. So this might create a disruption. So it might be possible that some of those Annus Horibilis are due to mobility, the short-term negative mobility effect that mobility might have on research productivity.
Yeah.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, and we don't have that information, but giving birth might create an Annus Horibilis in the following year. Divorce, there are life issues that intervene. So it's not, I argue with my team, it's not laziness. We need to seek the structures. But, when we looked at the funding and saw the effect, that is really impressive effect, a big difference. And it's a management issue. You can play with money, you cannot play with divorce. Yeah. So it's something that I would try to push. Our next model is to do the HLM and more
No,
sophisticated.
absolutely, absolutely, I understand.
And there are probably differences between disciplines. So physics would behave, prior publication is about using that data, separating physics, economics, and history as, representatives of the three major divides within academia. And those are totally different publication cultures.
Right.
And we can see where the Annus Horibilis plays in those three, but I thought the big picture is, right. It's this picture which is interesting.
Let me bring some more questions. I have Lily Young has some questions. Lily, you want to ask questions?
Thank you, Hugo, and thank you, Professor Yair. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I didn't realize that we could think of these no publication years as well. So I'm wondering, in your calculation of the average paper, like 2.56 papers per year, did you consider the role of the authors in that publication? For example, where they take the lead role. Okay, that's because sometimes in a really large group, like particularly in physics research publications, there can be like even 100 authors, and in that case, I'm wondering to what extent a single author is contributing really to that paper. So that's all right. My second question is about the differences between different fields. Maybe it's a too trusting comparison between the humanities and sciences, but even within physics, for example, more experimental physics and physics and or theoretical physics, they require different level of research funding, and they're more perhaps that relationship between having more research money and the research publications could be different between different fields. And in that case, similarly, in that case, is what is the relationship between the money and the publication? Sometimes we see this Matthew effect that more papers could lead to more competitive research grants, and also sometimes people, researchers, grant receiving professors are expected to add those grants, to acknowledge the grant records in their publications as the evidence of paying back or meeting the requirements of the grants. So in that case, is really the grants leading to certain publications, there could be some mismatch in that process. Just would like to hear your comments, and thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, those are great questions. They require a lot of work, like disambiguating the author lists in different disciplines. That's a big project. But I think that your questions lead to good research ideas that may even make the study more important. In my interviews with scientists, for example, those doing theory, they don't need money. So I was speaking to mathematicians, 80 years old, they still publish, they work, they just leave me in my office and I'll keep working. In experimental work, if you don't have your lab, that's it, you're dead. So that would make a difference. Earlier we talked with Hugo about retirement and its effect. So if you retire, at least in Israel, when you retire 60, in Israel now we are 68, pushing to 70, but if you retire, you cannot apply for funding anymore. You need to collaborate with some younger colleague to get your projects going on. But if you don't get funding, that means that your retirement age is critical. So Hugo told me in Hong Kong, 60. That cuts short careers, right? In America, they don't have to retire. So they can keep on applying for funding for many more years. And so how can you compare to scientists, one who was obliged to retire at 60, and one who could continue to 85 and apply for funding and remain active. So I'm not speaking in terms of fairness, but even in the evaluation of excellence, how can you compare systems with different rationales of how funding is going on? So I think it opens up, you see, Lily, suddenly you have a lot of questions. Once you think of the loss of talent, there are many open questions open up. And I'm coming from sociology, so I'm thinking of the sociological mechanisms which create or not create papers. But there are other, possibilities to think about those data. And yeah, it's just promising questions which came from us looking at the most productive scholars, and we noticed on the left side of the distribution, what's going on? There are too many zeros out there. And I said, okay, let's turn our eyes to the less productive part of the distribution. And I think it opens up a lot of questions.
Thank you. I'm now very keen to reading your future papers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We have some more colleagues wanting to ask questions. I will pass first to Yusuf, then it will be Julio after Professor Gad responds, and then Svetlana, and then we will see if we have more time or not for further questions. So Yusuf?
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Yair, for this really interesting presentation. I actually, some of my questions already answered by Hugo Horta himself, but let me highlight them. Basically, I was saying, which some part of it Gerard already asked. If someone who hasn't published that year, but that person has been teaching, that person has been supervising, that person has been helping with the admin people, etc., is that year really Annus Horibilis? Is that year really wasted money from the government? Maybe not. But anyways, the other point building on this is, maybe you already addressed this, like tenure track people, or sorry, teaching track people or others. Are they already addressed in your coding, etc.? So this is the first part. The second part is just building on Lily's comment, just came to my mind. I mean, have you used maybe fractional counting? If you use fractional counting, then you can take care of that co-authorship problem that everyone has. Like, one paper could be 100 co-authors, but if you use the full counting, you still have that one paper per person. But if it's fractional counting, then you can take care of this methodologically. Maybe you've already done this. Maybe that company doesn't allow that, I don't know, but some bibliometric other databases allow this. So thank you very much again for this very interesting presentation.
Okay. Is this a really Annus Horibilis if they haven't published and they did, they were sitting on a committee on... I think it's an Annus Horibilis for the person in the sense of how the institution looks at him or her. Because in research institutions, we mostly count papers. And that's the top priority. And even if you are, I have a colleague who's doing a wonderful annual film festival. Who cares? She hasn't published. So I can tell you that in the way I thought about my software, I wanted to create a more equitable way that I can count a film festival as an equivalent for a publication. And so to have more variability in the way we rank professors or their contribution to, but still when you sit on promotion committees, when the dean asks you questions about productivity, it's mostly about publications. So the Annus Horibilis, I mean, we mostly are interested in publications. It's that's the priority. Our publishing, our means to provide the public a return on investment. If we are just making, so yeah, a film festival is a great example for an alternative contribution to the public. But if we do just, you know, just sit in committees inside the university, who cares? Yeah, even politicians are interested mostly in counting, you know, ranking, which are based on mostly publications in whatever, you know, ranking. Fractional counting is the way to go. We need to, you know, look at the data and see whether we count twice some of the papers, and the company, or rather, we find problems in the data. In this huge size, you can expect to find problems. We find problems, but that's the way to do. Yeah, fractional counting.
May I take here just to follow up on Yusuf, because Yusuf's point is relevant, because it can be used, you know, as a counter argument. So I was wondering if it's possible to determine if, for example, even within the same institution, and because we see such a big variation within the institutions, that this variation might be because some people, let's say 20%, do not have usually any publication because they are focused on teaching. So maybe this might be part of an institutional strategy where, let's say, 20% of our academics are teaching much more to release time for the other ones to be excellent. Yeah. So in that case, if you can isolate that effect, if you can find that, let's say, like some people have most of their career as an Annus Horibilis, it's because they're more teaching oriented, and that's not their job, probably. Yeah. But at least we can use that as a proxy.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Help.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we can, you know, drill down into only the column of the zeros and see who they are.
Yeah.
Okay. Can be done.
All right. Just a suggestion. So, Julio, your turn, and then it's Svetlana.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Julio.
Julio, we don't
okay, Julio, I think your mic has some problems. Can you check it first? Maybe we start with Svetlana and then we go back to you. Okay, Svetlana then?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Yair, for your very interesting and complicated presentation. And as a person who have also administrative and teaching experience, I'm particularly grateful for your taking into account both administrative and research reasons for quantitative methods which you have developed and presented. It's very interesting and it's very useful, because we all know that administrators and academics sometimes perceive each other in isolation and in opposition. So my question is related with the role of quantitative method in publish or perish culture. Actually, my own interest to political economy started when I had a workload as 800 teaching contact hours per study year. So 20 hours per week for the whole year. So then it was almost 25 years ago. Then the oppressive culture of administrative pressure just grew. And now it is clear that publish or perish culture is often used for exploitation and, I would say, precaritization of academics. Not proletarization, because proletariat have their chance, but precarious academics, they do have nothing. And this switch-off system just extract the use their powers from academics and then take new cohort to promote a privileged class of academics who have resources in being united with administrators. They have resources for such oppressions. So we see, and we already discussed at least three moments: combination of teaching workload and the research obligations. Then this combination of professor and PhD student. And then this opposition between lecturers versus professors versus research professors. So my question is, what would you suggest to prevent this detrimental effect of quantitative method on academic culture in those countries or in those university cultures which are particularly oriented on ranking KPI? How would you suggest to solve this problem of top segment professors and administrative and large segment of precaritized academics? What could be your suggestions? Thank you.
So, at least in the data we have, we don't have precarious, temporary professors. It's people on track, on tenure track, from assistant to full professor. So we don't have the faculty of precarious. I take your question to a different. So the publish or perish process, at least in Israeli academia, is such that the government is pushing what we call colleges to become more research oriented, but they got employed to be teachers in colleges. So if I teach 6 to 8 hours a week, they would teach 16 hours a week, yet me as a professor overseeing the academization of the college will evaluate the college by my standards at the university. So we are pushing the publish or perish norms on the colleges without providing them the means to rise to the challenge that we say you have to publish more papers.
That was my question.
Yeah. You cannot, how do you say, to circle around the circle, right? It's the same as funding, right? Teaching hours is money, right? And if you provide less money, I get more funding by teaching less. I publish more. If they get less funding because they are required to teach more, they publish less. So the structure creates the output. And the structure is not a force of nature. It's human-made. And we as administrators can rethink the structures of how we distribute funding to better maximize human potential. So a government would think about the entire system. A president would have his own, university, and then a dean or a provost. Each one of us will need to rethink the way he distributes resources in a way that maximizes or minimizes the loss of potential. That's the point.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, let's try Julio. His mic didn't work at first. Maybe it will work now. Julio, we can't hear you.
Maybe write in the chat.
Yes. Okay. Maybe write in the chat, and in the meantime, while you're writing, I'll pass on to a colleague. Chenwei Zhang, you have a question? Do you want to ask it?
Yeah, good question.
Yes, so thanks, Professor Yair, for your kind presentation. I'm just curious, have you ever considered a gender difference in your analysis? Because I remember you mentioned there is gender information in the provided data set.
Yes, men have more Annus Horibilis than women.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, yes, it's not a big difference. It's not something I would write a paper about. Controlling for all the variables, gender has, with such big numbers of the sample, everything is significant.
Yeah.
But, the power of the prediction is very low. So I would not make anything of gender. It's surprising because you would expect females to have more years of non-productivity, but no.
Yeah, thanks for sharing about that. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Okay, we have also here Julio's question, and I think we're going to wrap up with this question. And he asks, do you consider multiple years in a row with no publications? It could be that you have many zeros happening by chance because of long peer review or because of luck.
Yeah, well, yeah, my colleague suggested that we do that. Count more than 1 year, and that would make the difference even more suggestive of whether it's laziness or, you're saying chance by, for example, we know from, although our data run till 2020, but we know that as of COVID-19, the time taking for a paper to get published, just to get a review, I don't have the numbers, but it became way longer for a paper to be published. So you're suggesting that if I was not, with a lot of money, I wrote one paper and it got stuck in the review process, I might find in my CV 1 year that you say by chance is there. And if you were to count 2 years or 3 years, then the laziness or whatever argument about people not being productive is more stable. And that we can do that.
If I might provide a final comment, I mean, what about, can you control the publications by where they're published? Because it might be part of a strategy. Let me give you this kind of situation or scenario. Maybe I'm only going for the really top journals. So basically, knowing that the review times are increasing and knowing how difficult are the reviews usually in these journals, it might be that I'm not able, there's a year past because the process is very long, and I only get it published maybe after 1 year or something like that. While on the other hand, if we have someone that publishes every year, it might be someone that never goes for the top journals. They go for the average journals where it's fairly easy to publish. And, one demonstrates that he or she is prolific. Yeah. So it might be simply a different strategy of publication.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example from economics. It used to be the case, that's the way it's running in the US. It used to be the case in Israel also, that you got tenure if you were able to publish one paper in top 5 journals. Okay? And it became impossible to publish in top 5 for economists. It's very difficult. So now they say top 20, okay? But they opt. So a colleague of mine tells me, oh, there's garbage publications, too many publications, most of them are garbage. They add nothing to human knowledge. So as an economist, he's saying, I'm only interested in, the top at the top. And so a career of an economist, strategizing his career for, getting one paper at the top, might have a lot of Annus Horibilis, because he wanted that specific, American Journal of Economics, and that's it. And he gets tenure. In sociology, it wouldn't work. We will, throw you away if you don't publish every year 2 papers at least. We don't have that ideology of top 5 or top 20. So disciplines would make a difference, but in that large data, you know, we can ask the software to do things like factor analysis or decision trees to see which disciplines behave similarly in the way publications are produced, and so we can proceed that way too. But just the example of economics shows you how different disciplines are.
All right, we have 2 more comments, but it's getting late, so I don't know. So basically, Svetlana is just saying that grant submission also requests time, but not necessarily provide funding. So there's might be a wasted effort there to some extent. And Julio is providing a further comment saying, also checking by articles with 0 citations after a few years might take into account what we're saying here. Some people may have the strategy to appear very active, but producing low quality science. Would this strategy be good?
Yeah. Just a point on Svetlana's point. I waited 1 year to get funding for this project. And I wasted 1 year in just waiting. We could do the work. I said, let's wait for funding, and we didn't get it. We lost, you know, 1 year lost. So yeah, that counts into. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope this was a great discussion. I really enjoyed the seminar, and the interaction, the questions was great. I hope everybody enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much again, Professor Yair, for giving this very interesting talk, and I wish you all the best for this project. I think all of us are very looking forward to read the final products. And let me wish you all an excellent week. And yes, I guess we will be seeing one another hopefully in the next seminar. All right. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.